So I have a little bear here that's ready to be sewn together. It's going to have articulating arms and legs. That means they're going to move. So in order to put them together, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a very good thread, and you're going to need a long needle. And I have a thread here that you can't break with your hands to save your life. And then I have these long needles here. This is a 5-inch long pointed needle, and I will show you exactly where this came from, but I can also show you where both of them you can order them from in the link below. So to get started, I take the thread and I get about 2 arms lengths worth of thread, and I thread it through the needle, and I put a knot at the end of both of the threads after I've put them together. I've got the 2 ends of the thread, and I'm holding them together, and I'm going to point them toward the tip of my needle. My thread's coming off of this end, and I've got my needle on this side, and I'm going to point the ends of that thread and the needle toward each other. I'm going to hold those ends of the thread with my 2 fingers, and I'm going to hold the needle at the same time. I'm going to wrap this thread around the needle 3, 4, 5 times. It doesn't really matter. The more times, the stronger the knot is going to be. And then I'm going to hold that group of threads that I just wrapped around the needle with my finger and my thumb, and I'm going to hold it lightly. And the end of that thread is still hanging out there. And now I'm going to push the needle through my fingers, and I'm going to let that clump of threads pull right off the end, and I'm going to pull this thread all the way to the very, very end. Here we are at the end, and I'm going to keep pulling. And I'm going to get this knot at the end, this crazy big knot. There we go. So you can see the size of the knot. And when I go to pull on this thread, if I open that up and I try to pull, I can't undo the knot. I cannot undo that knot. So that's the best kind of knot to do when you're putting these articulating arms and legs on a stuffed animal. And now when it's on my needle, it's my full arm length. So here's how you get started. After you've knotted your thread, you're going to pick up one of the limbs. Let's start with the arms. And these arms have a curve in them. That's the front of the arm. So I know they're both going to go like this on the animal. And I'm going to start in the middle of the top of the arm, about 1 inch down from the top. I'm going to put my needle all the way through the arm and out the other side, so that the knot is on the inside of the arm, at the armpit. And then I'm going to come back in the arm about 1/4 inch away from where I started, and I'm going to try to come out right next to that knot that you can see where I went in. And then, in order to keep it from pulling back through, that knot pulling through when the kid pulls on the arms really tight, I'm going to open up these 2 legs of thread here and go in through that loop. Now when you pull tight, that knot in that loop is going to hold it. And now I can trim my little tails. They don't have to all be trimmed all the way down to the knot. Leave yourself about 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. You're not going to see those tails. They're going to be in the armpit anyway. So now that I'm back in the center, on the inside of the arm, I can decide where it's going to go into the body. And I'm going to come out on the opposite side of the body, exactly across from where I went in. So I'm going to decide that I want to go in right around here. And I'm going to look straight on at my bear. And I'm going to come out straight across. That looks about even. And when I pull it, now I can see where my arm is going to be. and see how it's going to move, and I like that. So now that I'm on this side of the body, I can go into this other arm at about the same distance, and I can compare the two and come right out in the middle of the outside. And I can go in another 1/4 of an inch away from where I came out. And I'm going to want to be really close to the stitches on this side so that my arm can articulate. I want it to be able to rotate evenly. And when I pull that tight, both of the arms get sucked in tight to the body. So that's just the first step to figuring out where they're going to be. And I can hold up my bear now and I can look at where the arms are and decide if I like them. If I want to move them, this is the time to do it. But I like where they're at. I think they're going to hold nicely. So in order to tighten them up so that they're not all flimsy like this, I've got to go back into the body where I came out of, straight through, and back out where I went in on this side. Pull them tight. I like to pull them pretty tight because after they get played with a while, they're going to loosen up just a tiny little bit. So you're going to see dimples on the shoulders, but that's okay. Now I'm going to go into the arm where I came out, back out to the outside again. In that same spot, I'm going to do another 1/4 inch seam, a 1/4 inch stitch. Now it's important, as you're pulling them, to keep them rather tight, because after a while, after going back and through a few more times, I'm not going to be able to tighten it anymore. I want it to be just as tight as it's going to be when I'm done. And I can see that when I move these arms, they stay nicely where I place them. So I think that's a good tightness. I want them to be able to stay, so when the child plays with the toy, they can put the bear in any kind of form they want. So now that it's that tight, I want to kind of hold it there. And I want to go back in again, just a little bit away from where I came out of, and back through the body. And I want to look in here and go back through where I went in last time. So I look in the little crease in the armpit, and I make sure I'm going back in the same spot, and I make sure I'm coming out in the same spot on this other side. Might take a couple tries to get there. There we go. That's the same spot. Pull it nice and tight. Now I can come out through the arm again, same spot that I went in. And I want to make sure that I come out pretty much in the same spot, because if I come out far away, it's not gonna, the arm won't twist anymore. So I make sure I come out pretty much in the same spot. And now you can see, even when I'm not holding them, they're kind of staying where I put them. So I know that now they're being held firmly. So that was only going through twice. You can go through 3 times, 4 times if you want. I'm going to stick with the twice on this one. And I'm going to come back out in the armpit at the same spot I went in. And now, to keep those threads, those connecting threads together as if they're a single thread, I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go around the armpit a couple times. I'm just going to wrap it around, going around the arm. Pull it nice and tight. And now I can take a stitch on the body in the armpit on both sides of where I went in and out. And then when I take that stitch, I'm going to hold my hand to make a loop as I'm pulling it tighter. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go through that loop. And that'll make a knot right there. And then I'm going to go back through the body to the other armpit in the same spot. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go around the arm a few times. And now I'm going to take a stitch in the body at the armpit on both sides of that little spot where I've been going in and out. And in that loop, I'm going to put my needle through the loop and make a knot. Now I'm going to, when I put it through, I'm going to hold the tail thread again and make a second loop and go in one more time. Now that's a firm knot. Now I'm just going to go into the body, out the other side, doesn't really matter exactly where. And now I can snip the thread close to the body and it's going to get just sucked into the bear. And there's my arms. And I can make them go any way I want. So that's good. Now when you're situating the legs, you're going to want to sit your animal up on the table and put your legs out in front of the animal. Because when you're done with this bear, you want it to be able to sit. If you put your legs up too high, it's going to get wobbly and it's not going to sit. If you put your legs too low, it's going to fall over. So you want it to be sitting on the table. So I've got my thread and it's a whole arm's length double and it's knotted, and I'm going to put these legs on this bear. Now I want to sit it up, pull the arms out of the way, and I want to decide where exactly the legs are going to go. So I'm going to start with this one closest to me. I'm going to sit it up here, and I don't want my leg to be too far back. You know, I don't want it to be sticking out the back. I want it to be kind of even with the body. So I'm going to do that on this side as well. And I'm going to look at my bear sideways after I've positioned it. And I'm going to see where I want to go in. Now, I want to go in the middle of the hip. And I also want to go in through the body to the other side, just like I did for the arms. So I don't want to start out here because I don't want my knot out on the outside. I want my knot on the inside. So I'm going to just straight across from the middle there, I'm going to put my needle through and out to this hip. And so now I have the knot on the inside of the leg. And now I can take my needle and go, I'm going to just go a half an inch or a quarter of an inch away from where I came out. I'm going to go back through. And now I want to go back through right next to the knot. It's hard to see because I'm using dark thread and a dark bear, but I don't want it to show on the bear, so I'm going to pull that through. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to pull my knot away from the inside of the leg, and I'm going to open up that space between the two threads where the knot is attaching them, and I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go through that loop. That's going to secure it. And now I can snip off those extra threads. Not right to the fabric. Leave yourself a little bit of a tail. It doesn't show inside between the hip joint. Okay, so now that I've got my leg on the thread, I've got to decide exactly where it's going to go. And if I sit my bear up and I sit it flat on the table and the legs flat on the table, I can see how it's going to sit, and I want it to be so that it's comfortable and it'll sit up straight when I sit the bear down. So here it is. I went in through here and I came out right there. So now I know where I need to go in to the bear. I'm going to match it up while it's sitting. And I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go right in across from where I came out. And it turns out being right about here on the bear. So you can see that it's not close to the bottom, it's not close to the back, but it's not halfway either. It's closer to the back than it is to the front. And I'm going to go right through and I'm going to come out the other side in about the same position on the bear. This is why you need such a long needle. And when I look at the back of the bear, I can see that it goes straight across the back of the bear. So those are my two spots. So here I am coming out. And now I need to put the other foot on. So I'm going to sit my bear up again. I'm going to sit that foot down and I'm going to look at it and make sure it's not going too far back or too far forward. I want it to be even with the one I just put on. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight. I'm going to look at the 2 feet and I'm going to look at the hip. And I'm going to decide where it looks even. It's a little bit of finagling at first when you're putting the first couple stitches in, but after that it's just as easy as the arms. And now I'm going to go in right where I came out on this bear over here. I want to check that. Make sure when I pull it tight that the bear can sit up. And it can sit nicely. So it looks even from behind when I'm looking at it back here. It looks pretty even. So I think I've got the spots that I want to be in. So now I can go through the process like I did on the arms. I'm going to go in just 1/4 of an inch away from where I came out of. And I'm going to look on the inside and make sure that my needle pops through right where I went in. And then I'm going to go back through the whole body. I'm going to come out the other side right where I went in. Kind of cinch it up a little bit, and then I'm going to go through this other leg. Again, the same process. And back through the whole thing again. I'm going to go a 3rd time around. I'm going to pull it tight and go in the body, out of the body. If I didn't have a long needle, I don't know how I could possibly do this. I'm going to pull it tight again and make sure that they're going to stay that way. Very nice. It sits nicely without me holding it. But I'm going to go through the leg one more time. And back, and I'm going to come to the middle between the leg and the body, and I'm going to do that twisting around thing. Around and around and around the leg joint. Make sure it's pulled nice and tight. I'm going to put a knot in there. By holding this loop, tightening it up, putting the needle through the loop, tightening it up, and then I'm going to go through the last loop, tighten it up. Now I'm going to go through the other side. I'm do the same thing on the other leg. One last time through the leg. There's the hip joint right there. Through the leg. Now if you want, you can actually put a button out here on the hips, but you know, then you got something that a toddler's going to want to pick at and give it more reason to maybe be chewed off or something, you know. And I think you're better off without the button, as long as you've given yourself a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch stitch. It shouldn't pull through the fabric. I'm going to come back in the center between the two and do my wraparound. A few times. And we'll go 4 times. Pull it nice and tight. And then I'm going to take a little tiny stitch in the body on both sides of the area I've been coming in and out of. And now I can do my knot again. So I'm going to hold these threads, and as I pull them and it gets smaller, I'm going to go through the loop. And now I'm going to hold the new thread. I'm going to make sure I pull that first loop tight, and then I'm going to go through this last loop, and that's going to make a double knot. I'm going to pull it, and then now I can go into the body and out anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And now I'm going to just snip that close to the body so that the tail gets sucked right back in. So that's how you put on articulating arms and legs on a stuffy. The arms can move and stay down. The legs can move and stay straight. Oh, and you can maybe even balance it. Look at that. Ah! Well, there it is. It can stand all by itself. So I'm going to use beads to put the eyes on. These beads are small. I've picked blue. And if they were to be picked off, or if the thread were to break, or the bead were to break in 2 pieces and come apart, it's small enough that a child cannot choke on it. Yeah, they can swallow it, but they can't choke on it. If you're really afraid of a choking hazard, I suggest not sewing anything on for the eyes, but maybe embroidering little circles on there. I'm going to put these little beads on here because I've never had a problem with them coming off. And to do this, I've got to decide where they want to go. Now, I don't want them on the front of the face because animals aren't like that. Their eyes are more to the side. So I'm going to pick 2 spots that look even. And when you look at your pattern piece, I'm sure there's going to be a marking for where you need to put the eyes. But I'm just going to look at it evenly from the ears down and decide where I want them to be. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the arms and the legs. And I'm going to go in and out. So I want to take a stitch where I want it to be, just a very small stitch. And I want to put my needle through that loop so that it's anchored there. And I want to pull that tight. And then I want to go into the bead. You got to make sure your needle's going to fit through the bead. And in this case, I'm very lucky, and it does, even though it's a very small bead. Now I'm going to go back in where I took that first stitch, and I want to go out to the other side straight across from it. So I'm going to look at this and see where I think it looks even. And I'm just going to look at this bear straight on. And I think I've got it exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to push that all the way through. And I'm going to pull it tight. Now I want to make it so that the hole is straight across and you're not really looking at the thread so much. You're just looking at the bead. And I'm going to pull that in, and it's going to dimple in so that they can't grab it very easily. And now I'm going to do the other side into the bead and back into the head. And I'm going to come out over here again. Right where I was the first time. And just once more I'm going to go through that bead. So I want to pull this nice and tight. It's just dimpling a tiny little bit, if you can see there. Enough that you can see the bead, and it's popping into the head a little bit. Now I'm going to go through that bead one more time. And then I'm going to go back in again right where I came out of. And underneath the one on this side. Can turn that a little bit. Now I'm going to go in to the bead and out of the bead, and I'm going to put a knot underneath the bead on this side. So you have a knot on each side. So I take one little stitch, pull it tight, make a loop, put my needle through the loop. I cinch it up tight and put my needle through the loop again. And now they're knotted and they're on there. And now I can go back into the head and out anywhere and cut it close to the fabric. And there we go. Those are the eyes. So that's it. Now our little bear is done. And or bunny, whatever you made, it's got articulating legs and arms, cute little eyes. I hope this series of videos helped you out for your free floppy bunny pattern. I took the floppy bunny pattern and I made the ears shorter and round to turn it into a little floppy bear. And you can do the same thing too. Have fun!